And just remember to turn it off.
Okay, 3 bucks. Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so we've got the recording going already.
Great. That's great. Yeah, I know we've had a couple of people were sending emails to me asking if we were going to record it because they were interested, but they're supposed to be on annual leave, so this is great.
Yeah, I think we record all of them then.
Yeah, yep. We've tried to. I know I've forgotten it a few times in the past, but you know, it's like all of a sudden halfway through you think, oh shoot, I forgot to start the recording, but you're on top of it, Bill.
I just happen to have a wife who has been doing nothing but Teams since April.
Wow. Have you guys been going into your office, or have you been doing remote?
I worked in my office from mid-May until last week. And then they clamped us down again, so back at home.
Yeah. Our regional office has been basically shut down. They're allowing, I think, 10% of the people can be in the building at any given time, but if you want to go to the building, you have to have a justification. You have to get approval from 2 or 3 people. So I've only been back there a few times just to pick up stuff that I was missing, but it's a little crazy.
Yeah, the corner that I worked in had, I think, 12 or 13 cubicles, and there's usually like 3 or 4 of us in there. You know, last week I was the only person in there.
Yeah.
One of the engineers walked by and he's like, "Oh, wow, you got this social distancing down to a science." I'm like, "Yeah." The advantage is, you know, all my stuff is in, so, you know, throwing stuff in the car and hauling it home. Huh.
Yep. Yep. Well, I'm gonna pop off and go do a few things before we start the meeting. But Bill, if you need me to do anything, just call me out because I'll be on the call.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, Bill, I'll keep an eye on the waiting room if you want me to do that.
Okay, that'll be great. Okay, everybody, it's 8:31, so we'll get started here in just a moment. We are recording this, and if you're not talking, try to stay on mute so we keep the background noise to a minimum. Thanks. So it's 8:31, so I think we'll get started here. So this is the December cohort call. The discussion today is going to be on streams and aquatics. Bill Goodman, I'm a hydrologist with the Modoc National Forest. I do reed and bear assignments. So, guys got any questions? Just raise your hand, and Lisa and I'll try to get to you, or you can unmute and throw a question out. So as far as streams go, they're easy to ID. I mean, they're long linear things that show up on topo maps and show up on the ground fairly easily. It's not like a cultural site or something where a non-archaeologist like myself would walk by and not even notice it, or wildlife tree with some sort of bird or something in it that is no different than any other tree. So streams are fairly easy to find on the ground, and most people know that you're not supposed to drop the blade and go right down them, but that does happen. A good friend of mine shift as a dozer heavy equipment boss, and after a couple shifts he switched over to reed and doing some ground recon, and found where a dozer had gone right down a stream for several hundred feet. And so he asked the FMO to track that down, and turned out that he was the heavy equipment boss with that dozer when they put that in on night shift. He just didn't realize in the darkness that they were going down a stream because it wasn't very rocky. So those things do occasionally pop up where down the creek. Most people know that we're supposed to avoid doing that. I was on a fire earlier this year with Cal Fire, and they put multiple dozers down multiple channels on contingency line, even though they had a road within 50 to 150 feet away where they put a dozer on each side of it. So they had 3-blade wide, and then for some reason thought they needed to put a dozer line in the bottom. Really don't know what the heck that was about. So, like I said, most people knowing I was supposed to put the dozer down the channel, you might want to just mention that during some of the first meetings and stuff with the ops planning, and if you're out on a division, make sure the division guys also aware of that, just as a nice reminder that we're not doing stuff that we shouldn't. Like I said, I'm not sure why that Cal Fire thing went down there, but that was in the daylight and intentional and in multiple locations, and that created quite the problem for rehab, trying to figure out how to fix that, since we took a channel that was 18 to 24 inches wide and it became 12 feet wide. So if you have wild and scenic rivers, streams of threatened and endangered aquatics, or municipal watersheds, you definitely want to make sure that ops plans and divisions know that they should be using the minimum impact suppression techniques, so that we can keep those impacts to a minimum. It's, using your natural barriers, burning out from roads, and other things to keep in mind with streams is that if we got dozer line that's going down to a stream that's roughly perpendicular to the stream, the last 50 to 100 feet should be converted to hand line so that it is easier to rehab and we'll have less sediment getting down into that creek. And most vision ops people are pretty good at that. On the fish bio did run into a problem with that once, where the vision guy said that they were just going to take the dozer all the way straight down on the bottom side. A friend actually ended up going talking to the agency administrator, who went and talked to the ops plans and IC, and they got it converted to hand line. We're not really sure why that guy didn't want it. He didn't give any operational reasons why they needed, a bigger, wider line down in the bottom. You can also put in some pumps and put some wet line in addition to hand line if you need a wider buffer, depending on what kind of fire activity you're expecting, or if they want something a little wider for better chance of holding it in that location. I'm going to share my screen here. We're going to talk about fire retardant for a moment. There you go. Can you guys see that? Could be the Interagency Wildland Fire Chemicals Policy and Guidance.
We do not.
No, we don't see it, Bill.
Okay. Oh, we have way too many tabs open. Okay, how about now?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, so retardant in streams or adjacent to streams, most streams have a 300-foot buffer off each side where you're supposed to keep retardant out of the stream, or also some places have wet meadows, wetlands, that kind of stuff also identified as avoidance zones. So if you go to this website, I'll copy it and throw it into the chat. Or you can also just Google Forest Service fire retardant, and you'll come up with this page. So if you scroll down here, there's the avoidance maps, and those are all online. And the advantage about that is that when there's any updates, they're made and they're updated to this site. So you don't have to print them out and go find a new, update every year or whatever and print stuff out. You can just go to this website, pull up the area that you're looking for. So you can get the maps there. There's stuff here on how to get started with reporting tools if you do end up with something inside the avoidance zones, spill calculators. There's also a webinar up here and Q&A information related to what you're required to do on Forest Service lands with aerial retardant that gets within the 300-foot buffer. And the retardant reporting is only for Forest Service. I'm not really sure why that happened, but it's only Forest Service. So if you don't work for the Forest Service, on a Forest Service incident, you probably have to deal with this related to fire retardant. one of the fish bios I know was telling me about an instance where they set up a batch mixing plant within 75 feet of a T&E stream, used that and filled small air tankers from that, and everything was great until they were finished and they took the operation apart, and then they technically had a misapplication within the avoidance zone and had to go through all the reporting stuff. So his thoughts there were that if you can do some pre-planning and set the stuff up farther away, then that would be much better if things go bad and you don't have to go through all this reporting nonsense. So any questions on fire retardant? Good.
Hey, Bill, this is Lisa. I would just say that some of the other agencies, I know the Park Service utilizes that reporting process that is a Forest Service process. So I think it's widely utilized outside of the Forest Service as well.
Oh, that's good to know, even though they're not required under that lawsuit.
Right, and the reason is that we don't really have any other processes for recording those misapplications. So.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. So that's retardant, and yeah, keep the stuff out of the creeks. And if you end up with it's a lot more common now. When we first started doing this retardant reporting stuff back 2005, 2007, it was a lot more unknown, and we had 2 applications actually into 2 T&E streams on one of the fires I was on. And nobody would tell us where the stuff was. That they kept saying that there weren't any misapplications. I kept hearing that there were, and part of that was because the FOBs and a few other people were not Forest Service, and so they thought that we were trying to get somebody into trouble. And when we realized what the problem was and told them that it's simply a reporting requirement that we at Forest Service have to do, they became much nicer and helped us find the locations. We knew it had happened. It's trying to find the locations and get into there was a little more of a challenge. But after they realized we weren't trying to get anybody in trouble, it became much more kind. One of the things to remind people about related to streams and aquatics is fuel contamination and spill prevention for small pumps if they're using those for putting in with some wet line or pumping water out of a creek to fill up porta tanks or that kind of stuff, or even porta tanks, that kind of thing. Usually those pumps come with spill containment, and so kind of like a little short box that the pump sits into, and it's supposed to hold enough liquid that if the thing's reasonably level, that if the motor blows, any gas, oil, and petrochemicals related to the pump will all stay within that containment box. So that's fairly common these days, and people are used to that, but it's also good to remind them that they need to use those containment devices and make sure that they're mostly level so that they can hold liquids, fuels, gas that we're talking about need to be.
Hey, Bill, there's
Yes.
a couple of comments and questions in the chat. And so one person asked, should we report misapplications to Fish and Wildlife Service or Forest Service region?
Yeah, that's part of the reporting and the forms that you're filling out. Some of it goes to Forest Service Research, some of it goes to Fish and Wildlife Service. I don't think any of it goes to NIMS, National marine fisheries. I think it's just Forest Service research that does all the tracking for us, and I think Fish and Wildlife Service. It's been a few years since I actually did one of these. Last time I was involved in one of these, I just handed it off to the fish bio and let him run with it. It's all in the protocols and instructions, but it's definitely Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife Service that get notified. It's all explained in the reporting procedures on that website that I showed you guys.
And then there was
Hey,
another.
Bill, I can.
Oh, go ahead, Lynn.
Hi, everybody. This is Lynn Gasaway. Bill, I can expand on that a little bit. If it's just a general misapplication, and we're actually trying to use a new term, of course, which I can't remember. If you get retardant in those avoidance areas and you fill out the forms and you determine that there's a no effect, which is the second part of it, of having that specialist look at it, it just gets reported in an annual report to Fish and Wildlife. If you have a potential adverse effect to an endangered species, then you have to start your whole Fish and Wildlife consultation, as you would under any kind of project or any fire that has an impact. So.
Okay, thanks. And even if you've done this before, you might want to every once in a while just go through the reporting guidelines. There used to be a clause a couple years ago that they got rid of, where agency administrator and the IC could determine to use retardant in an avoidance zone to keep a fire from getting much larger, and that got taken away. So it's kind of an evolving process of what you can or can't do. Either keep up with the regs and look at it every once in a while, or pass it off to somebody you know that's done it before and let them run with it. It's kind of like an incident with an incident. They'll be busy doing that for a while and won't be able to do their normal read stuff. Any other questions on retardant? Fuel contamination spilling?
So I put the link on the chat, and then there was another question asking how many fuel cans can you put in one containment berm? Is it supposed to be able to hold the entire contents of the containers?
So the spill containment thing that comes with most of our portable pumps, that kind of stuff, is supposed to be able to hold all the gas and oil from that pump. If you have like a couple jerry cans or fuel cans, then that would be in excess of what that spill containment for the pump would hold. So those would probably need either their own spill containment can or just have those sitting farther away so that if they do, tip over, get knocked over or something, they're farther away and it won't be a problem, or if you got a spill containment box, they can fit in theirs. But the ones that come with the pumps are just designed for the amount of gas and oil that the pump holds and needs to run. All right, so we good there?
Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. One of the other things you might want to point out to your ops plans or division people is if you have any wet meadows that they need to know about regarding suppression operations. A lot of times meadows can look dry on a map or air photo and they won't know they're wet until they get there. We had a fire a couple years ago where a couple years earlier we finished a stage 0 meadow reconstruction and it raised the water table back up, and so it was completely wet from edge to edge, and they tried putting in some dozer line near the fringe of it, and this thing was wet enough that I was showing some people the site and the guy had those knee-high rubber boots, and it was mucky enough that it sucked the rubber boot off of his left foot. And the dozer was at the fringe of it, and you could see where it went like 12 feet, and then just sunk. And he yanked it out, and then moved the dozer line over 50 feet, and everything was good. But just making people aware that you got some wet meadows or something out there might save them some hassle, and don't have to worry about burying dozers. And the wet meadows, depending on what kind of habitat they have, those will also fall into the retardant avoidance areas. Fish Bio, I know, was telling about a fire that he worked on in Oregon, on the west side of Oregon, where they have big streams and large logs and weedy debris for fish habitat and all that good stuff. And they had actually done some stream improvement there a couple years earlier, where they had helicoptered in with a sky crane some really large pieces of wood as part of this stream restoration project. And because partners were involved in the cost of helicoptering large wood in, it was actually identified in that the IMT incident management team got from the forest that this was some stuff to protect. And it was kind of a remote area, hence the use of the helicopter. And so they had a couple of hotshot crews get in there, and they wanted to cut through some of the large wood so that they could have easier access if things went bad. And that kind of went back and forth between them and the resource advisor, and the division said, well, it could be a safety thing, so they sided with the hotshot crews and let them cut up some of this large wood. So one of the first items in the repair plan was several $1,000s to helicopter in new large wood. So if you have some large wood that you need to protect, those kind of things, you definitely want to make sure that your ops plans and division know about that. Forget what the number on that was, but it was a really expensive fix, but it sounded like it was needed to be cut through just for some safety concerns. Fish screens. I definitely want to remind people that when they're using portable pumps and or drafting, to use the proper fish screens, and that the fish screens haven't been modified. I've seen a few where they took a drill and made the holes larger so that they could pump water faster, but then that kind of defeated the point of the whole screen. So make sure they're using the fish screens and fish screen, and then water transfer from one place to another. There's various aquatic invasive species and stuff that got mentioned in the aquatic invasives talk we did for the Reed Cohort several months ago with Cynthia Tate, an aquatic biologist. And there's whirling disease and all kinds of other water issues that if you transfer water from one basin to another, you can transfer the aquatic invasive from one place to another. So if you look at the best management practices for aquatic invasives, there'll be all kinds of stuff in there about proper screens, cleaning pumps, tanks on engines, tanks on water tenders, Bambi buckets, or the tanks inside helicopters, depending on what types of apparatus are using water and have the potential to transfer water from one place to another. So there's a lot of BMPs related to cleaning and disinfecting so that we're not moving aquatic invasive species around. Looking at something here in the chat box. Okay. There's some good comments in the chat box on berms and fuel containment on jerry cans.
So Bill, there was one question. Can you talk a little bit about where you can find how to figure out what the appropriate fish screen is for the particular area? I know that they come in different sizes, the different openings.
Yeah, I would either check with your local fish bio or if you got an aquatic invasives person in your area, you can check with them. And they would give you all the updates on your screen types, and that kind of stuff. I think there's something in the read manual, if I remember right, that talks about different size of screens. I don't. That's something I usually have to look up every time. I don't commit that to memory because my memory's not that good.
Thanks.
I don't know if you're also drafting. I've seen places where they wanted to get the water tender closer, so they didn't have to use as many lengths of the suction hose to go into the creek to get the water out of the creek, and they ended up burying the truck because they got it too close and it kind of broke down the stream bank and got in a wet, soft area. So might encourage your people to use an extra length of suction hose so that they can avoid getting the truck stuck. Save them a lot of hassle. If they're building any kind of dams, I've seen this with either small pumps or where they're drafting with water tenders. Sometimes they'll take rocks and stuff and try to build up a dam in a deeper spot to get it easier to put the bell strainer or whatever thing at the end of the suction hoses in the water so they can draft easier. Just need to know that if they build any kind of rock dams and stuff, those need to be taken apart before they leave. And sometimes they will ask you how much water can they take from the stream. Clearly, you don't want it to be run dry, and you're going to have to want to talk to your fish bio if there's any kind of critical habitat in that area or downstream. There's going to be certain limitations on how much of a drawdown you can have related to that stream and how much water they're pulling out. I've seen a few times where they put big portable tanks near the creek, fill those up, the stream level would drop, but then it would come back up after they got the hello well filled up. So that's kind of a temporary deal. So yeah, work with the fish bio and make sure that they don't drop the water level down too far. Put my page over, sorry. Okay, one of the things you can do, I did this a couple years ago on fires on. We had a fire that was burning and I kind of pressed it up over the radiators coming into another basin, and that basin had two main streams, both had T&E fish, and everybody was kind of expecting the fire to get in there and then just blow the whole drainage out and come roaring out in a couple of days. So at the team in briefing, we were standing around looking at this maps, and I was talking to one of the ops plans guys, and I said, well, there's this old road here. It kind of goes from the main road and roughly parallels one of the main channels. I said, what if we open that up, high blade it with a dozer, knock trees out of the way, and you put a couple small engines in there and burn off the road and basically burn out half the watershed so that we can keep the fire from burning the whole watershed. And he looks at me and says, who the hell are you? I said, well, I'm your district hydrologist, your resource advisor. I'll be your bear team lead and your bear team hydro when this is all over and done. He says, hydrologist is recommending that we burn out half the drainage. I said, I'm simply giving you an idea of something I think might work in this location because we have an old road there. And if we can burn it out, then that's better than losing the whole drainage. But anyhow, the ops plans guys talked about it and modified it slightly, and we did end up opening up that road and burning out from it. So some people I know say that's a little more prescriptive than they like the resource advisors to be. But if you do see something like that where there's like a road or some option where you think it might help, you can always throw that out to your ops plans, division people as an option. Just, hey, throw this out there. If you guys think it's operational, sound, you can make it work. From a resource perspective, I'm good with it. If you guys make it work, go for it. So anyhow, that one worked that time. Some of the division guys that I know really like their resource advisors that are working with them to be solution oriented. If you don't just throw problems at them, say, hey, we've got this municipal watershed here, or we got this stream here with a teeny fish. Try to be open and suggestive to options that they can utilize. Don't just give them the no, no, no. There are times to say no, but be open to options and be solution oriented. One of the other things that one of my division soup friends told me was that if you got a lot of stuff going on in a division or area of the fire, he said, prioritize the stuff for us. If you got a stream here and you've also got a tree that's habitat for a goshawk, bald eagle, or some flying sensitive bird, and maybe a cultural site, he says, prioritize that stuff for us. So that, things get bad. What do they got to work with? So in that scenario there, your cultural site would probably be the highest priority, and then everything else would be lower priority. Where that might be, so fires on a couple of years ago, we found a couple old cabins, and for some reason the forest didn't know they were there. Anyhow, we were found out about it because Aerotac told Division that he thought he saw something down in the meadow and gave us a GPS. So Division told us to go find it and see what the heck it was. So we found a couple old cabins, really bad shape. There's no way to wrap them because of the structural integrity or lack thereof of the cabins. So we put some dozer line around them and hoped for the best, and got a bunch of pictures. And they burnt down. Stuff happens. So we got a bunch of pictures and got the sites documented before it burnt down. The other thing there to think about is one of the division guys I was talking to a few weeks ago, he said, in the past, you used to say, you look at FS Pro and, the fire's going to take however many shifts to get out to a certain spot. You know how much time you got to work with if you're trying to mitigate impacts to a certain resource. He said, the way the wind hit some of our fires this last summer, he said, in the past you would have thought it would have taken 3, 4, 5 operational shifts to get there. And this last year, stuff happened much faster. So there are times where you might be identifying stuff for division to protect, and if things get going fast, there's just no way they're going to be able to pull it off. But if we can, they'd like some kind of prioritize, some trade-offs. Do this, here are the pros and cons, and this cultural site's probably going to be the highest thing to protect out there, as opposed to stream or something else. Streams, eventually they'll recover on their own, but your cultural site probably won't, depending on what exactly it is. So that's what I got for you on streams and aquatics. Went through that a little faster than I thought I would, but any questions or comments? Group discussion?
So yeah, Bill, this is Lisa. I know you work for the Forest Service, but I was wondering if you can give us some general sense of what kinds of geospatial resources a read might be able to expect to come into a unit. So if I'm a cultural resource person, I come in, I'm a read, and I'm not an expert, I'm not a hydrologist, but what kind of geospatial resources I might be able to find on an incident on maybe just your region or maybe just your forest. I don't know if it's all over the board, but trying to get an understanding of what sort of resources you might be able to find.
Yeah, that's going to be all over the board, depending on what forest you're on and what they have for staffing and how much of a priority they make on pre-season planning or not. I know some places that put a lot of emphasis on pre-season planning, and a team shows up and they got an external hard drive. It's like, here you go, here's your hard drive. It's got the layers on everything about T&E streams, municipal watersheds, weed sites, everything you can think of. And other places are like, oh shit, we just kind of hope for the best, and we don't put any thought into pre-season planning. So it'll be all over the board. If you do show up in your off unit, you would probably start with your agency administrator, see if they've been given any information, see what's sitting in WFDS, the Wildland Fire Support Decision Support System, and depending on what you find or don't find there's been times where I've basically driven to the district office and tracked down the wildlife bio, the fish bio, and whoever else, and said, hey, we got a fire, it's over here, we think it's going to the northwest, based on current behavior and winds. What have you got out there that we need to be concerned about? Sometimes that works really well. Sometimes, I had one of the people I contacted at the district was like, yeah, I don't want any fire out there. But, way too late for that. But yeah, sometimes you can get some really good information. Sometimes it's just going in and talking to people. Other times, like I said, the district and forest has everything set up on a hard drive, and everything you could want is right there. It makes it easy. That answer your question, Lisa?
Yeah, it does. Thanks. I know it's you can't think of everything before an incident, and especially if it's off your home unit. But just a reminder to everybody who's on the read cohorts, you have a home unit, and it's great to try to get your data in order, because eventually you'll probably host an incident on your home unit. And sometimes it means, walking around your office or virtually to kind of harass people to get the data. available, so you can put it all in one place. But yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we've tried some places I've worked to just see if we could get like a luftus layer and just call it areas to avoid. It would be everything from weed sensitive plants, archaea sites, everything to avoid, and just identified as area to avoid and no other information. And sometimes that goes over well and other times it doesn't, because luftus, once it gets approved, it becomes public knowledge, and so then that can violate some of the laws related to protecting parking and cultural heritage sites, even if it's been identified as simply as area to avoid and nothing beyond that. Sometimes that gets a little funky. Other times it's a real easy, quick way to cookie cutter out spots where they, shouldn't put spike camps or other things or keep equipment out of. Any other comments, questions? Don't see anything in the chat at the moment.
I think Lynn was populating a couple of links on the chat pane regarding the drafting information, water drafting, and and pump sites, things like that. And Brian put a link to a products for purchasing screens, so that's great.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, this is Lynn, and I guess I'll add that it's not one screen fits all situations, that you need to discuss with the locals what the species is to determine what size screen and what type of screen is appropriate to use there, because the fingerlings or the species that we're trying not to pump into the pump come in different sizes, and so the screens need to be, the holes need to be small enough that that smallest fry won't get into the pump. But in other places you might be able to use a bigger one. And Brian just put in that there's frog boxes too. I've never used a frog box. So, and that you can, I think some of the information I put on the Cloud Vault, there's one that, there might be more than one, that directs you on how to quickly build a screen if you can't buy them or you don't have time to buy them. And there are ways to deal with it. If you can't get screens at all, like putting just a bucket in, a weighted down bucket into the stream, and then put the end of the hose, the suction foot, into the bucket. And I'm sure some aquatics and fisheries people will know other ways to do workarounds, but that's the major one I know of.
Okay, Brian, I was just going to ask what is a frog box? Brian just put up a emoticon with a oh no, so I don't know if he's having a hard time getting on, but I was just curious about what the frog boxes are. It's for protecting frogs' eggs and or tadpoles. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Huh. I want to see what it looks like.
Yeah, see what I find when I Google frog box. All right, any other questions?
Looks like one just came in. What is the best way to address erosion control measures in coastal units where we have had coastal chaparral fire fires burn the bluffs with steep drop-offs or near wetlands with potential runoff into the ocean.
So that's just it's fire line. We have they're taking that disturbed line so that water can't run down that zone. So it's going to have, a few water bars. It's also roughing it up. One of the terms I like to use with heavy equipment operators I've been with is either make it look like a mobile field, undulations and rough, with either taking the bucket and digging down and making earth mounds or throwing some rocks, brushing it, somehow roughing that up so that you're not getting concentrated flow. That flow is going to get slowed down and not just run down your dozer line or hand line. If it's just fire edge without, just from a fire area, it's not going to go into the ends of coastal bluffs and steep drop-offs into the ocean. If there's no dozer line, hand line there, depending on the burn severity, it may not be much of a problem. If it's a lot of high burn severity and steeper, then there are ways to get some ground cover back. For years, they would use straw, and they would either place it by hand, or they would put large bales of straw in cargo nets of helicopter and drop it. And I forget, there's some minimum height you have to have so that the bale will drop down with enough force that it blows apart essentially and covers your ground and gets some ground cover back. So you can do that. It used to be called bale bombing, but then they realized that wasn't very politically correct, so now it's just referred to as like straw mulching. Even if you look for weed-free stuff, you can get some weeds in there, and that does concern some people and botanists. So what some places have tried to do is take wood shreds. There's a company that makes a commercial item called a wood shred, and drop that. Or you can take hazard trees and chip them up or run them through a tub grinder and make your own wood shred. The advantage about the wood is it's not going to have any invasive plant seed mixed in. It's going to be heavier, so if you have a windy spot, it's going to stay on the ground better. If you have a steeper spot, it's going to the wood's going to stay on the ground better. So that's kind of what I'd be looking at if I was looking at chaparral or any erosion, fire line, hand line, or in general area-wise where you're worried about that site contributing excess runoff that might move sediment or water to something downslope, downstream. Looks like Charles says he has a picture of the moguls he wants to share. Not sure how we give him control here. There's a dozer line. Some of the pictures that Cedar provided last month were really good examples of how to rough up the site to provide a lot of energy dissipation so that water wouldn't run down your dozer line. All right. Any other questions or comments? Pretty quiet out there.
Bill, I just wanted to, if you're done with your presentation, I just want to remind people, if you're starting to think about your resource advisor classes, your N9042, please share that information about where you're hosting those classes, and even if they're restricted only for park staff or forest staff or whatever, that's fine. But we're just trying to capture a broader picture of when and where these classes are being offered. So if you have those classes that you're setting up the dates on those classes and where they're happening and restrictions if there are for participants, please let us know and we'll post that on the SharePoint, not the SharePoint, the Cloud Vault site. So everybody can see that as well.
Good idea, Lisa. Yeah, they need to know what classes are coming up, especially with the COVID era, and if we're going to end up with being in person or if we're going to be recorded or removed.
Yeah, I think at this point, the Park Service, I've been talking with the Pacific West. I work in the Intermountain region, and the Pacific West people and I have been talking about hosting another virtual class, a joint effort, thinking that probably in the spring we're still going to be in some sort of restrictions for travel and things like that. So I don't know what the dates are going to look like, and I don't know really who all is going to be driving that process, but I think that discussion has started. So there will be probably at least one online class, and I'm curious about what other classes out there. So thanks.
Yeah, I know most of the RX310 Fire Effects classes are going online completely this year.
So we had one more question from how to get access to the Cloud Vault, and I will post it on here on the chat link.
I'm doing that right now. It's just everybody. The Cloud Vault is open
thanks,
to everybody. That you don't need any special access, and it's just www.tinyurl.readcohort. Right, tinyurl.com/readcohort. I'll put it in there.
Thanks, Lynn.
I posted in the link to the fire retardant reporting website.
Why am I not?
Lynn, you got anything?
Did you say something, Bill? You cut out.
Oh, sorry. I was asking if either you or Lisa had anything to add, or if we're going to wrap this up here.
I don't have anything to add. I just say everybody have great holidays and stay safe in the COVID land. Also, just be kind to each other and check in with your fellow Reeds. A lot of us that were out all summer, or even the people who couldn't be out, it was a hard season, and protect yourself physically and mentally, and check in on everybody, make sure that we all support each other.
All set. Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. That was a great sentiment. I totally agree. It was like a heroic effort by the folks who went out on fire. So thank you so much. If you're one of those people, supported them in another way, thank you also. So I hope that I actually have really high hopes that 2021 is going to be a better year. So happy New Year to all of you.
Sure hope it's better. All right. Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Great presentation. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Let's see, remember how to turn the recording on.